Hello, this is Katie Fahey,
And I'm Brittany Buford.
and we're the co-hosts of Behind the Ballot, a podcast about democracy reform on a local, state, and national level.
We've both seen injustice in how our democracy works and took steps to reform and improve democracy in areas close to us.
I'm the co-founder and executive director of The People, an organization that gathers and enables everyday Americans to find common ground and take action together to create a government truly of, by, and for the people.
I'm the managing partner at Partners in Democracy, focused on democracy renovation that reconnects people to civic power and redesigns institutions to enable an effective citizenship and incentivize responsive and accountable representation. Welcome
Welcome.
to the latest
Welcome.
podcast. Welcome to the latest podcast of Behind the Ballot podcast from Respect Voters. Today we're talking with actually our co-host, Benjamin Singer, about Respect Missouri Voters campaign that has successfully gathered signatures to put a constitutional amendment on Missouri's ballot that would ban politicians from overturning voter approved initiatives, attacking citizens' ability to use the initiative process, and deceiving voters from confusing ballot language. Hey, Benj.
Hey, Brittany, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. It's fun to be in the hot seat for a change. I'm excited to talk with you and Katie here on Respect Missouri Voters.
And Benjamin, we have you on not just because you're our co-host, but honestly because I think you're working on one of the most exciting ballot initiatives in the country. It feels like super relevant to our podcast, but also just the reform community in general and our way to pass these initiatives. We're going to hop in and spend most of our time talking about that, but it would be awesome to actually take us back. And how did you get started in this work? What's your war story? What kind of ballot initiatives have you worked on before? And then maybe a little bit leading into like, and what has brought you to kind of be leading and kicking off the Respect Missouri Voters ballot initiative.
For sure. Yeah, I'll try to keep to the short version of that story, but I definitely didn't plan to be like running political campaigns or doing organizing. I had actually always cared about homelessness and poverty. And long story short, I was working for a homelessness organization in Chicago where I'd gone to college, actually working for a couple of conservative business leaders who had founded a homelessness organization because of their personal story. And the government was basically cutting funding from these services that were helping people go from being incarcerated to becoming like healthy, happy, tax-paying members of society, and giving big handouts to their campaign contributors while claiming we couldn't afford to be helping people get out of poverty and become self-sufficient again. So it was just clear that our political system was really unresponsive to people's actual needs. I watched people I knew lose their jobs. We couldn't serve as many women who'd been living in abandoned buildings or men who'd been living in cars, like get reunited with their kids and get jobs and things that is just good for everyone. So when we've got politicians locked in rooms calling donors for dollars, the donors are sick of being hit up for never ending sums of money, and the people of America are getting screwed. I was like, I gotta do something about this and help fix our political system. So that's the short story of how I came to work in political reform and democracy reform. And I came back home to Missouri to help run the Clean Missouri campaign. I was the communications director, and we passed that with 62% to improve transparency and ethics and the revolving door between lobbying and gerrymandering in Missouri. It was an amazing win with 62%, a majority in every district across the state. And the legislature threw it back on the ballot with trick language to undo it. Top line was not really what it was about. And that's why we're here doing what we're doing with Respect Missouri Voters. This idea came from volunteers to do this campaign that would ban the legislature from putting trick language on the ballot, from overturning what the people want. It would require a huge supermajority of both parties to put anything back on the ballot, but ultimately has to go back to a vote of the people. And of course, stop them from attacking the process itself, which they did 3 times last year with 2 laws and 1 constitutional amendment that'll be on this year's ballot that would basically make it impossible to pass any future ballot initiative. So our movement is going to defeat that and pass our own initiative, so we never have to deal with this crap ever again.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks for that recap on also what Respect Missouri Voters is. You guys have seemingly done a lot of work thus far, particularly around your ground game, and the methods that you've used thus far have not been ones that we've normally seen. So, can you just take a moment, one, recap what Respect Missouri Voters is doing in terms of their campaign? And then, good thing Katie's here, because you guys have caught that like Katie Fahey effect, and want to talk to you a bit about how that work is going for you and what you've taken on there.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, on that latter piece, I had come to be more and more in the political operative campaign mindset where it's just like, oh, you just need enough money to pay the people to get it done, to pay a signature gathering firm to get on the ballot, and pay, the best consultants and mail and ads that you need to pass it. And then we saw, all these pro-democracy initiatives in 2024 fail when they took that approach and hadn't really been a citizen-driven movement to decide what policy do the people of our state actually want, are actually asking for, and then empower those people to create that campaign and talk person to person in a way that's going to be way more relatable and credible than some slick mailer, put together by a consultant who speaks, the way they speak instead of an everyday person. So yeah, we followed Katie's model here, in terms of what she and 4,000 other volunteers led in Michigan in 2018. And we barnstormed the state. We did all the things, right? We created the Facebook group. We barnstormed the state with the 25 town halls, asking the people what they want to be in this policy. We had the broad strokes. Okay, we want to protect the initiative process. We've got these 3 big picture items, but it kept getting fleshed out and taking unexpected turns because we were actually listening to the people of Missouri in terms of what they wanted. And our policy is so much stronger and is going to be much more successful at the ballot and in protecting the will of the people of our state as a result of listening, which is something that, ironically, sometimes for our movement, we're bad at practicing what we preach in terms of finding common ground and actually being responsive to the people. So it's been really refreshing. It's definitely harder. And I will say this, we're not doing it this way for fun or because we have some sort of like self-righteousness of, oh, we're going to do it better than other people do it. It's out of necessity because we've been told for the last few years, when we've tossed this idea around with the big powerful groups and consultants and funders, where they've been like, oh no, that it's a nice idea, but there's no big funder that'll pay for a ballot initiative to save the ballot initiative process, because everyone's just interested in their own issue, healthcare, or this particular democracy reform, or job and economy stuff. So there's this massive bystander effect, and we had to do something about it. The people of Missouri knew it, and they have shown that they were willing to step up. So to answer your first question, Brittany, we've gathered almost 130,000 signatures. We're going to need to approximately double that, or a little bit more than double that, over the next 3 months to qualify for the ballot. We have over 1,200 volunteers who've turned in those signatures, about 75 volunteer-led teams around the state of those gatherers putting these signatures together, an amazing volunteer-led communications team and everything. And we've only been able to accomplish it because we were asking Katie for advice throughout the process, and she's been advising us and our volunteers throughout the process of, all right, you need to set up these departments, you need to delegate properly, you need to empower and onboard people properly, really just give people the tools and the structure they need to create this campaign and to succeed. So Katie, thank you for showing what was possible in Michigan, because I never would have believed it if you hadn't accomplished it. And it really should be the best practice for our movements So we're excited, I know, at Respect Voters to put together that playbook so other citizen-led movements across the country we've shown viability. Now we are hopefully going to get some big in-state investors to help build on the approximately $700,000 that we've raised, just $100 at a time, $1,000 at a time. And now hopefully we can get some bigger players in the state who want to protect our freedom to get us the rest of the way there.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And the ripple effects that you see from taking the time to go across the state and to invite people into leadership positions and all of that. I mean, even if you look at the total number of small dollar donations that you guys have and where that money has come in from so far, I think
Yeah.
I saw 98% of your funding coming from Missourians, which for a lot of these reform campaigns isn't always the case because of people assume that these issues that deal with the systems of democracy can't be popular enough to resonate with folks. And what's really interesting about the ballot initiative process, I feel like that's part of what we're hearing a lot in general across the country of like people don't even know what the initiative process is. And, gerrymandering's been out front a lot this past year, which is good for that issue. But I think there was a lot of skepticism, Benjamin, that in Missouri, folks would care about an initiative for the initiative process, this thing that not even everybody knows you have. So as you've been out gathering signatures, as you've been working with the leaders, why do you think that this issue is resonating right now with thousands, or I guess hundreds of thousands of Missourians?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the truth is, yeah, people think these process issues people aren't excited about, but frankly, like this is why people have such strong feelings about politics because they know the system is broken and they're tired of power hungry individuals, whether those are politicians or other special interests, trying to game the system instead of it working for the people like we're taught in school it's supposed to. So, look, the Missouri legislature has overturned or gutted the will of the people about 7 times in the last 16 years. And Missouri's not alone in
Wow.
experiencing this. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, other states have seen this. Missouri might be at the vanguard. I don't know. But like, this is a common problem of power hungry politicians attacking the will of the people. We all know that people in power become self serving instead of serving the common interest. And
And each of
so,
those initiatives theoretically had
Mhm.
thousands of supporters and people who were volunteering their time to pass them, as well as millions of dollars. And then the most important piece, the majority of Missourians voting, yes, we do want this change for all of this to be
exactly.
overturned. Wow.
Yeah, as one of the latest examples, about 58% of Missourians voted for changes to wages and paid sick leave that they felt was in the interest of the people. Whether, whatever you think about it or not, that's how the people voted. More people voted for that than voted to reelect Josh Hawley in our most recent election here in Missouri. The legislature's not trying to overturn the election of Josh Hawley. Whether you love the guy, hate the guy, feel somewhere in between, he won the election. So did this ballot initiative. And you know what? If you want to make a change to it, if you think there's something wrong with it in terms of, the implementation or, this little clause there somewhere, okay, fine. Propose that change, put it on the ballot with honest language and let the people decide. And that should be something that has bipartisan support. And so that's an interesting thing on the policy. If other people are thinking of doing this in your state, like there was an issue with a minimum wage initiative 20 years ago, and it had an effect on firefighters' overtime. But a unanimous majority of the Senate saw that and passed it unanimously to make that fix. And so that's why our policy would allow for fixes, but it would require 80% of the legislature to vote to put that on the ballot and then ultimately have the people decide. So it's not whatever party's in power gets to just override the will of the people. Because you know what? When Democrats ran the Missouri legislature, they were also attacking the will of the people because they didn't like that Missourians were using the process to limit taxes. So this is a totally nonpartisan and cross-partisan issue. It's not about right versus left. It's about politicians versus the people.
Love that.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point. And it's evident by the amount of volunteers that you guys have that have hit the ground in support of this campaign and getting the signatures that you guys have gotten. I think you mentioned 130 something thousand signatures thus far, which is amazing. That also means that you guys have a lot of work to do in terms of volunteers being organized and engaged in this campaign. And you mentioned exactly why people need to be engaged, but how do you balance the excitement of the campaign and the volunteers that are there with ensuring that people really understand the gravity of this ballot measure, as you mentioned, the depth of it and what can happen? How do you balance those of consequence and opportunity that are truly there behind this ballot measure?
It's a great point because obviously, like, there's big news items that keep people motivated. I mean, the legislature's certainly doing our job for us in terms of keeping people angry and motivated because they keep doing stuff to undermine the will of the people, whether it's on making our districts even more gerrymandered, disregarding signatures that people gathered to stop that process from moving forward. So like that emotional piece is kind of self-sustaining, sadly, because of the brokenness of our system. But you're making a good point that it can get to be a grind, right? Like day to day, volunteers still have to be sending out those texts to their fellow volunteers and making calls, being like, "Hey, you turned in 500 signatures so far, but I haven't seen you in a few weeks. What's going on?" Um, so I think part of that is also having a pipeline that, these are volunteers. And if they're getting burned out or have some job change or family sickness, like that we've got other people there to step in and that we have good processes in place to be identifying and fixing that. So that's something we continue to work on. And I'll say for the political operatives out there who say, well, volunteers aren't reliable, that's why you got to do this all paid. I'll also say anyone who's managed people knows that paid people also aren't always reliable or get the job done super effectively. And so you always got to be on the lookout for better talent. But, we launched from 15 locations across the state, which no ballot initiative in Missouri has
Wow.
ever done, to my knowledge, because when you're limited by only allowing paid staff to do things and not empowering volunteers to do things, you're limiting the ability, you're limiting your own capacity. And so if you have really capable volunteers who've been very competent professionals and are just now retired, ready to step up and lead, or at some other point in their life where they're excited to be a leader in a movement, give them that opportunity.
Well,
I think
Benjamin,
that's
I'm
fantastic.
I'm curious on, are you seeing that volunteers maybe do the job better in any ways?
Oh, absolutely. Like our communications department, that's a great point, Katie, because like we build in these assumptions, even including like even the way you heard me talk about it, that they're not going to be as good or as reliable. And that hasn't been true. In our communications department, they've produced better newsletters, social media content, engagement than any paid people we've ever had. And part of that, yeah, is actually structural. So like, for example, when we were doing town halls, we had volunteers asking me, "Hey, I post on Reddit and look at Reddit a lot. Do we have a Reddit account?" And I would, instead of being like, "Oh, let me approve all your messaging, wait until tomorrow morning because it's night and I'm at the gym right now," I said, "You know what? Go ahead, create a campaign Reddit account and post on Reddit." Just that trust from folks who've demonstrated that they're trustworthy and competent, you're going to magnify what you're capable of if you're not bottlenecking everything. And they're going to talk to people in a more relatable way than I would as a political operative. So that's part of it. And then also you've got folks who are available all times of day, evenings, weekends, whatever, not limited by this structure of, oh, it's going to be this paid professional doing it when they're online. And again, bottlenecking everything. And just they're bringing passion. They're doing it for quote unquote the right reasons, right? Just because they want to save democracy and they want to build the movement, not because they want to build a portfolio or build their career for their next position. And again, this isn't to hate on people who do this work for paid, right? The three of us all do it for pay because we believe in it too. But in the more people you empower, the better, decisions you're going to come to and messaging you're going to find and diverse backgrounds and experiences and skill sets that you're going to bring into your movement.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
about you guys, but I feel like the the longer I've been in this, the more I have to make sure that I'm like going out and making sure I'm in touch because like you think about it all day, all the time. And there is so much news and democracy stuff happening, particularly right now in America, where I do think it's more top of mind for everybody else. But sometimes it makes you less responsive to the things that like really matter to folks who don't get to do this as their day job. And I think being able to have that pulse on like how are people really feeling and what is resonating and what's going to move somebody from, you know, watching another Netflix movie instead of like coming on and volunteering for the campaign or doing anything else in their life. Like what are those moments and
Yeah.
those periods of time that, you know, are most urgent and making people feel that way. So I think that's really helpful.
Yeah. And I mean, Ben, you mentioned it at the top, right? Like what made you want to get into this? And I think it's the same when you're talking about volunteers, right? Connecting it to things that people are passionate about, things that really matter. There's a lot of discussion in the current atmosphere, current environment about like healthcare and housing and education, right? I'm wondering if as volunteers come to you guys, if you're seeing any like touch points of those things existing or how people are relating this campaign and this ballot measure back to kind of their personal lives and their personal selves.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we have done what I think the quote unquote democracy movement has really struggled to do, which is to get out of the bubble of this niche of people who care about like changing this voting method or how primaries work or whatever. Because, I mean, partially because of the next level organizing, the Katie Fahey style organizing that we've done to empower and grow the movement organically, but also because this is an issue that affects every other issue. And we definitely have people showing up because they cared about healthcare or they cared about wages or they cared about taxes or jobs or whatever it is. Like the realtors in this state have used the initiative process a couple times to help limit taxes because again politicians generally aren't going to limit their own ability to tax and spend other people's money. So it's like everyone has their own reason for caring about this, but it's also a nice entree for people to see, oh, how does the initiative process work? What's really possible when we come together? How can you gather signatures and get on the ballot and take an amazing policy to the people that you never could have gotten through the legislative process? And oh, by the way, we can reform our system of democracy. And so it's a great entry point for people to also learn about how we can end gerrymandering or open primaries or change voting methods. And that's something I'm excited to do this year after we, God willing, qualify for the ballot. We still got a long way to go, everyone. But, lead people through start a deliberation process so that when 2026 ends, we're ready to go with another policy to continue moving power in Missouri back to the people where it belongs.
Love that. I feel like one of the things that a lot of our fellow reformers, they'll have kind of that pulse, that sense a little bit of like, hey, this feels like it's the right issue for multiple reasons, that it's gonna maybe resonate with people, but also that it will lead, it'll be proactive. That's one of the things I love about this initiative is it's not only fighting back against all of the attacks that have happened, it's actually proactively protecting future fights, which I feel like we rarely get the chance to actually be a part of, which is really great. But so often I hear kind of the story you were telling around, but the bigger interests don't see it. They are more focused on their one issue and just trying to pass that, not even maybe seeing sometimes the wider picture that that might be immediately rolled back if we don't fix some of these systemic issues. And one of the biggest reasons people don't get started is money. And I have been able to see you in action a little bit, Benjamin, and I feel like you are so good at fundraising. And it would be great if you could kind of share, you know, in this slightly non-traditional, even though I would say it's kind of the root of ballot initiatives, the everyday people coming together. But what are some of the strategies that you're seeing are working? What are the ways that you guys are innovating to be able to, you know, there's real costs, print petitions and still pay for some folks' time and websites and all that kind of stuff. How are you doing that while you're waiting for that bigger investment?
God, great question. I'm sure this is top of mind for so many people as they're thinking about getting going. I'll give two answers. One, if you are an organization like a nonprofit that has some seed funding and even just, one or two staff, that helps a lot, right? If you've got a base of like $50,000 to get started in terms of, hiring an organizer to help staff these Zoom meetings and make sure everything is working in terms of your online system too, your sign up pages, your auto responders, your Slack or whatever you use to onboard people and see who's active and run your daily Zoom stand-ups, whatever. Like that's really helpful. But I'll also say you really don't need that. Like, when Katie here got started in Michigan, like many of you know, with a Facebook post, like, yeah, it was totally bootstrapped on top of her and everyone else's day job. And it really is very doable, right? You're starting a Facebook group, you're setting up an Action Network or Nation Builder or whatever account, you're holding, your evening Zoom meetings like every night or whatever. And if you're building an authentic community, right, of hundreds and then thousands and then tens of thousands of people, because you're doing it in a way that actually is relatable to people, not something that feels like super corporate. No, you don't really need me. Um, you're going to have your base of financial support. The story we told people when we barnstormed the state to show everyone what was possible was like a simplified version of what you did, Katie. We were like, hey, here's how it's been done before, right? When they had 4,000 people, they said, okay, we have to hit a six-figure fundraising goal by next week. If we all just raise $10 from 10 friends each, we can do that. That's what's possible when you've got a massive movement. I will say our fundraising events were really helpful in terms of hitting big fundraising pushes. So definitely organize those fundraising events, try to recruit a popular local speaker, whether it's, bipartisan politicians or former politicians or community leaders who people like. That's great. But also, people are just excited to get into a room and build community. And even if you're not connected to wealthy people or famous people or politicians or former politicians, you could totally do it, just like Katie and her crew did in Michigan. Now, one piece I realized I didn't finish an earlier story on that Reddit post. The punchline to that Reddit story is that we had a lot of people showing up at town hall saying, I heard about this on Reddit
Yeah.
and I've never done anything political in my life, but I can't just sit by while our politicians just bulldoze over what people voted for. Like that's not right, and I can't stand for that. So again, empowering regular people to go talk to other regular people in areas where political people aren't talking is you're going to grow your movement. And I remember when we launched, I was at our biggest launch was in the St. Louis area, but we had 15 more across the state. We had 400 people just at this one. And I asked for a show of hands. I said, raise your hand if you've gathered signatures before. And it looked like about half the room raised their hands. And I said, really? Let me just confirm. Raise your hand if you've never gathered signatures before. And it looked like just over maybe 55% of this room had never gathered signatures before. So again, we're building this movement bigger than any movement maybe Missouri seen before since the suffragist movement or maybe prohibition. This has been a long time. So again, you're on the fundraising front, that's a big financial base, but just is not, more importantly, on the signature gathering and campaigning front. It's formidable, and that you can build power that's unstoppable.
Great.
That is amazing. And I'm glad that you went back to Reddit because I think a big part of the work that we do in terms of campaigns also comes from like a kind of new age digital organizing model of being able to use existing social media or like email or ads or however it goes. So trying to understand a bit more about the difference between the digital organizing. I know you mentioned really trusting the volunteers that have shown that they're trustworthy and in being able to kind of hit that mark versus the traditional kind of in-person organizing, which seemingly also works because you guys got 400 people in a room. So how are you guys using each of those tools, and is there one that has worked out better for you or one that you would suggest people starting with?
Great questions. I mean, getting into like political campaign organizer speak for a second, it's what's called online to offline organizing, right? And a ladder of engagement. So, and some of it is, science and metric based where you're giving people clear next steps. And then there's some additional human component there. So, if your start is like joining the Facebook group, and then there's okay, actually filling out the form and telling us what your volunteer interests and availability are. And then there's actually showing up to the Zoom meeting. And so these are successive steps that you give people to get there. So then they show up to the Zoom meeting. Okay, great. Then you're actually barnstorming the state with your town halls. Do they actually help organize or show up? And then there's, leading a department. And, when you ask, like, hey, Teresa, I've seen you doing a ton. Would you be willing to actually, book all these town hall locations or actually help organize these 4 town halls in your portion of the state? And so that's where you start getting into the less clear, like more person to person intuitive sense of like, oh, I saw these, Teresa or Chris becoming really active on our Slack. And I was like, hey, do you want to start joining our daily stand up, and help actually making this happen? They hadn't filled out a specific form that made me want to do that, but I saw them stepping up. Or, you see what someone's like talents or passions are, you talk to them, got to make sure to do those one-on-one meetings with people who are real promising leaders and get a sense of their interests. And then ask them, okay, will you take on this responsibility? And a lot of them are dying to be asked to take on responsibility, or I should say living to be asked. So it's 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 a mix of both. And also like Tony, our co-founder, the volunteer who showed up and said, hey, I just gathered 900 signatures for healthcare, and if you all do an initiative to save the initiative process, I'll be in the street for that. And then we surveyed our supporters across the state, and they agreed that's what we should do. She saw someone at an event on Thursday, this past Thursday, who had said, oh yeah, I was one of the top signature gatherers in the state for this ballot initiative last cycle. And she's like, oh, you should get involved with Respect Missouri Voters. He said, yeah, I know, I just signed up online yesterday. And yes, she could have like waited for the process of someone to follow up with him and get him to come in and get clipboards, but she thought to herself, you know what, I'm just gonna go bring these clipboards back in before I leave and just give him clipboards directly, and get him started. And before she knew it, he was already working the whole room. She had given him one of our flyers with a QR code, and he was getting a friend of his to also sign up and volunteer. So you just got to be on the lookout for opportunities, but you also have to have that clear online to offline strategy of what's that ladder of engagement for people to take the step from online, or excuse me, from online digital to like actually doing stuff in the real world and leading these departments. And if you end up with someone leading a department who like maybe they're actually not the best communicator, organizer, delegator, that's fine. There's so many different roles, and you need both managers and doers. And that was something we really struggled with early. This is the last thing I'll close out because I know we only have like 10, 15 more minutes to talk. But in terms of scaling out, right? Because building this huge movement requires you to constantly be scaling out and looking for new leaders. Don't limit yourself to thinking, oh, who do I know of these volunteers who would be good for this? Feel free to put stuff out there, post in your Facebook group or your internal chat tool of like, hey, we're looking for people to do this really important thing or these 3 important things that we need. Who's interested, right? And that's where you also break through the red tape and let people to just step up and say, yeah, I just, retired, or I just, my kid is back in school now after break, and I've been looking to do something. And that's exactly the kind of thing I've been looking to do, where you might be breaking through 3 more steps on the ladder of engagement or your own blinders in terms of who you know.
I think that's a really good point. I think I often call it like the invitation. There's so many people like waiting for
Mhm.
the invite. Like they don't feel like, oh, somebody else has got that covered, or, maybe I don't have enough experience, or I've never done it quite like this before. But then you kind of throw the invitation out there of like, hey, would you want to do this? Or we're looking for somebody to do this, and you never know who's going to pop up and what's going to happen. And yeah, our I have this great story about a wood carver that helped us cut our clipboards. And what was so funny is then she went on our Facebook group and was like, "Hey, are there any other wood carvers?" And there ended up being three of them that then could like come together and make a plan. And like you never would have thought that, or that that would be one of the keys to saving democracy and keeping a small budget for a ballot initiative, but it totally was. And I love like little stories like that. Taking us kind of out of Missouri just for a second, even though happy to zoom back in, but unfortunately, these kinds of attacks against the ballot initiative process are happening across the country. We see legislatures trying to get rid of the initiative process, make it so difficult to use that people can't use it, challenging initiatives that have gotten passed and undoing them. So, as you think about some of the other folks in our coalition, Benj, and like them either debating doing a respect voters type initiative on the initiative process, or maybe even they're in the beginning stages of that. I mean, do you have like, what do you think like the top two or three key pieces of advice are when starting off on this endeavor?
Great question. First thing I'm thinking about is you really need your leadership, like your mindset, if you're thinking about doing this, to be in facilitation mode, thinking about what great people and ideas can we put together. And you can be the filter for that if you want, right? Everyone's afraid of handing over power to these unknown, inexperienced volunteers, but really like this is the only way you're going to get it done. And trust me, they're going to be better at a lot of things than you are.
So lots of
And
delegation, I'm hearing.
yeah, you need an organizer, who whether it's you or someone else who's really good at listening and empowering and saying, "Oh, that's a great idea. Go do it." Right? Like I did with the Reddit stuff. And I will say, and Brittany, you and Katie both know I'm not the best people person. I'm not the best project manager. You don't have to be Katie Fahey to do this, although it certainly helps. But like you got to at least be coming from that right mindset. And it does help to have, I'd say, at least two leaders, right? Partner with one other person where one of you is keeping an eye on the big picture and the other one's doing stuff day to day. Partnering is always great, whatever kind of venture you're doing. And when you're getting started. And Tony was part of that too, our volunteer who showed up and said, I want to do this. And we were like, great, like make the presentation, go out and give it. I helped with the first few, but like volunteers have given 99.9% of our presentations, not staff. So you got to be able to trust. And even if you are someone who looks down on volunteers, which you should not, but imagine even if you think they can only do it 60% as well as you can, and this is me trying to meet you where you are, right? Because I think they could do it better than that. But what if you had 2,000 of you doing it 60% as well instead of one or two or three of you? So yeah, you got to meet people where they are. You got to really listen and facilitate and be open-minded, right? Like we started thinking, okay, we need some sort of supermajority, to make changes. But what we heard at town halls was, I don't want any supermajority to be able to make a change. It has to go back to a vote of the people. And yeah, the polling validates that. And even like this self-selecting volunteers who showed up, I didn't necessarily think what they would say would be validated in polling among all voters, but it was possible. It was validated. And I'll say this too: necessity is the mother of invention. So if you have to bootstrap it, you're going to find ways to do it. You just got to be
So
more
true.
creative than just going to the market rate of whatever it is.
Yeah.
So like on polling, right? I've worked on enough campaigns that I'm able to write a poll and then we can text it out to people. And one of those questions is, who did you vote for president? And that makes it really easy to weight. Okay, Missouri's 58.5% Trump, 40.1% Harris. We can weight our results really easily for that to get a rough sense of what policies, language, how ballot language performs with really robust results. All you need is a texting provider and the voter file sometimes. And we can definitely recommend. I mean, there's a lot of ways we can help you rather than reinvent the wheel, help our coalition members do these things on the cheap. Okay, you need a headquarters. Think about who do you know who owns businesses? And I'll say that rather than real people in real estate, because it turned out to more helpful to think about who owns businesses, broadly speaking, who has got some underutilized space that you can use. And also, like Katie's people did in Michigan, they just use their own houses. Real grassroots citizen to citizen movement. That's how things used to work. Like the suffragist movement that I mentioned, like it's person to person. Like get out of the mode of everything has to be, corporate and professional, and have your own office, and like, yeah, be concerned about your own safety and things like that. But there's ways of mitigating that risk while also just getting things done without getting caught up in the red tape.
Yeah, I think if your attitude is, I'm gonna find a way forward, that's like half the work.
Yeah.
Instead of kind of
Right.
putting those excuses up and not
Yeah,
that it's not hard or doesn't take more time or innovation or sometimes has to move slower or whatever, but I really do think it's like the other thing I've noticed, I don't know if you have, Benjamin, but I almost think a lot of volunteers need that too. They're like, I'm willing to give you
Yeah.
my time and energy and trust, but like, I want to know we're actually going for it. Like, I don't want and then we're
Yeah.
dipping out next week or whatever. Like, they want to believe that you're going to be in it with them, willing to try to make it to the finish line.
that's right. So on that, and then I'm going to step back to helping coalition partners one more way.
Yeah.
So yeah, the traditional go no go idea that political operatives have of, oh, we need to make sure that we've got $2 million or whatever lined up before we launch. Yeah, I'd say don't do that. Like come up with something that you think works. Sure, do some initial cheap polling like we did. Um, if you want to check your biases, but like the mistake that we've traditionally made, like when I was on the Clean Missouri campaign, we underestimated, first of all, how low the legislature was willing to go to undermine the will of the people. But
Mhm.
also, like, we had all these other pieces that sounded nice, and it was this whole package of like really important reforms, but that allowed our opposition to say, oh, well, people were really just voting on this one other piece, not on the redistricting piece, when that polling showed that wasn't true. A majority supported all of it. But like in Michigan, it was all redistricting. You guys didn't try to get, cute or have this comprehensive package. It was like, no, we're going hard on this one issue. And you had a mandate on that. You also already have protections in your constitution, like the kinds that we're trying to get, and some other factors. But like, you got to build a movement, right? Don't think about
Yeah.
like traditionally as political operatives, I was often in the mindset of how do we win this battle? How do we win this short-term campaign? But we have to win the war, not just a battle. Because if you think battle to battle, you're going to lose. You have to build a true, massive, powerful citizen movement. And I knew that if that meant that we potentially fail to qualify for the ballot and lose along the way, then like, unfortunately, that's a step that we'd have to take to get towards building a movement that could ultimately win power in the state. But we've shown when you're just willing, when you have a strong vision and a strong structure that you're organizing people in. I have been organizing for 10 plus years. So definitely like read organizing books, talk to people like Katie and Brittany, listen to this podcast so you can learn how to do it well. But if you are good, you're going to win. And if you're transparent with people and have good goals, like this is something I would say, like your initial goal should be, we need to build an online movement of 2,500 people signing up to say, yes, I'll help with this before we decide to move forward. That's a good go, no go goal, because that's something that everyone can do. It's inclusive and everyone can go out there and ask their friends to sign up. And then you've got your base to then organize people from who are going to actually lead and do stuff online. And of course, you have your check boxes on that form of how you could do stuff. Now, in terms of how we can help coalition members too, even before we've got the big playbook ready to go, and yes, we can recommend vendors for you to do your own polling, but we're also happy to share our own polling and our own policy research that we've already done. We're more transparent than you may be used to. So we did that. We shared that with people in Nebraska, where they were able to see, wow, yeah, this stuff performs well across the spectrum. Obviously, they did their own polling and stuff too. But like now there's a Respect Nebraska voters because their legislature's also been undermining the will of the people. And folks are doing this in Arkansas too, and a couple other states that are looking at this. So, and all of these movements are led by people in their states, right? It's not me going in doing it. We're not sending money. They are making it happen. And we're just helping give advice to you on this is how you can reach other people in your state who want to make this happen.
Yeah, and I think that's great. One of the things that all of us kind of have in common, and throughout what you've just talked about, you've hit it the nail on the head with it, is that all three of us did not start out as
Right.
experts in this space, right? Or having worked in this space. All of us came into it through other passions and other like caring about other things. And it takes time and energy and going to trainings and all of those things. And you've mentioned being willing to help others kind of get through that pathway a bit quicker than maybe we were able to. Um, you guys have just done like extremely well in being able to share what you're finding and share methods. And I know that you have additional plans to continue to share and to be able to kind of educate people wherever they are and how they can move about this. So as we wrap up, I just want to give you a few minutes to also talk about those plans and bringing the lessons and bringing the stories out of how we're doing this work, how you guys are doing this work. It's been endless, but certainly appreciative of the path that you guys are taking. So tell us a bit about your future steps, where the Respect Missouri Voters campaign is headed, and how people can keep up with you guys moving forward.
Totally. I'll wrap up with a story that then points us towards the future. So it was months ago. I think it was before we launched Signature Gathering, but I got a call from a conservative radio host in the Ozarks of Missouri. And he said, I was reading about Respect Missouri Voters, and, I voted no on everything that was on the ballot, every ballot initiative that was on the ballot last year in 2024. But I just think what the legislature's doing with trying to overturn what people voted for, that is just wrong. And I want you to come on before the high school football game at 5:20 p.m. this Friday and tell the people in our area what you're doing that they can get involved in and how they can help. And so I really encourage all of you out there listening to this podcast or watching, wherever you are in the country, to break out of whatever stereotypes or partisan mindset you have about, well, liberals won't support this and conservatives won't support that, or these establishment groups in my state won't get involved. And so it's not possible. Break out of that mindset. We're happy to share the presentation we use to show Missourians what their power can look like, even without establishment support across party lines. Because, yeah, we have big plans for the future, Brittany, whether it's, moving to nonpartisan primaries or redistricting reform, or I think people could even support, proportional representation. Like people are just sick of the the corruption and stuff not getting done. That's what the people want. And all that gets done is what special interests want. And across party lines, people are fed up and they're ready for something different. So whether it's reforming money in politics or voting or something else, if you trust the people of your state to help co-create your policy, you're going to end up with a policy that is going to be broadly popular and that's going to be better than what you came up with in this place. And that co-creation of the policy and campaign is what's going to give thousands of people it's going to give thousands of people the buy-in because they will own your campaign and they're going to do whatever it takes to make it succeed. So
Ben,
if you want to follow us to answer your question, search Respect Voters, search respectmovoters.org and join us. Sign up on our homepage and join us, and follow us on social media. We're at Respect Voters across every social media platform. And if you want to see our national page, that's respectvoters.org.
and Benjamin, I think there's maybe an exciting update about how people can follow the Respect Missouri voters stories from volunteers and updates from the campaign even closer if you want to give our listeners some insight into that.
Sure. So we do have a Facebook group you can join where a lot of volunteers are sharing their pictures and stories and tips and things. And it's amazing content that you're getting. We do have our Facebook page for the Missouri campaign finally says, and that's our page rather than our group, finally says respect Missouri voters instead of just respect voters. So that's an exciting update. Katie, was that what you had in mind or was it something else?
I thought there was maybe some whispers about a podcast.
Oh yes. All
Oh,
right. So going forward, we're gonna have a series here on the Behind the Ballot Respect Voters podcast. We're gonna have a series where we're gonna be interviewing some of our key volunteer leaders, coalition partner leaders, and donors on why they're involved and what they're doing, and tips and information on how you, if you live in Missouri and are listening to this, can help advance the campaign or step up as a leader in the campaign. And if you're elsewhere in the country, it's going to be really useful content to learn how can you build something like this in your own state.
And we wanted to invite other folks who are working on campaigns. If you also want us to follow your campaign along, follow along with your campaign, let us know. But Benjamin, we're so excited that Missouri will be helping kick that off and take those teachings and those learnings and make sure we're learning them in real time with you guys.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thanks so much for sharing and being here with us to do this hard work.
Thank you both for helping make this possible and for reminding me what I was supposed to say at the end in terms of this exciting state-based series that we're going to do and where we'll feature series from other states as well. So thank you both for helping have made this coalition possible and sharing your wisdom and guidance with me onward for a government that respects our voters.
And
Thanks
then
so
instead of
much.
better ourselves. Thanks, everybody. And remember to tune in and also to remind your legislature to respect voters.